The night was heavy with dust and silence, the kind of silence that hums louder than noise. I pushed open the door of the roadside bar, the hinges groaning as if they disapproved of strangers. The air inside was thick with the smell of old whiskey, burnt cigarettes, and something metallic that clung to the tongue. I didn't come here to drink or talk. I came here because I needed a place where nobody would ask questions. My boots carried me toward the corner, head down, heart pounding in a rhythm that didn't match the country song whining from the jukebox. I had been running for days, maybe weeks. It was hard to keep track anymore, and every mile left me more hollow than the last. Yet here I was, pretending the shadows would protect me. That's when I felt it. Eyes on me. Not just a curious glance, not some drunk staring too long. This was sharper, like a blade pressed against the back of my neck. I shifted in my seat, scanning the room. There were the usual characters, the bartender polishing the same glass over and over, a couple arguing softly in a booth, two truckers bent over their beers. But then there was him, sitting in the far corner. A man with the kind of stillness that screamed danger. A bounty hunter. I didn't need a badge or a name to recognize the type. His hat shaded his eyes, but I could feel his stare pierce right through me. My stomach turned cold, yet I forced myself to look away before he could taste my feared. I thought I was alone in my misery until she walked in. She didn't belong here, not in a place like this. She moved like smoke, like fire wrapped in leather and temptation. The kind of woman who carried secrets in her smile and dared the world to ask what they were. Her eyes found me before I had the chance to look away. One corner of her lips lifted, the smallest smirk, but it hit me like lightning. I told myself not to stare, not to invite trouble, but trouble had already set its sights on me. She sauntered over, every step making the wooden floorboards complain, until she stopped in front of my table. "Mind if I sit?" she asked, though she was already sliding into the booth across from me. Her voice was low, playful, with an edge that dared me to say no. I didn't. I couldn't. She leaned forward, elbows on the table, close enough for me to smell the faint trace of smoke and wildflowers on her skin. My throat went dry. She didn't waste time on introductions or small talk. Instead, her gaze dropped briefly, slowly, lingering near my waist, then back up to my lips. The air between us thickened. It wasn't love, not yet, it was danger dressed up as desire. And I wanted to taste it, even though every instinct told me it could burn me alive. But even as she toyed with me, even as my heart betrayed me by racing faster with every glance, I couldn't ignore the bounty hunter. He hadn't moved, hadn't blinked, but he was watching. Watching her. Watching me. Watching us. I felt trapped between two storms, one sitting across from me with lips that promised both salvation and destruction, the other sitting in the corner waiting for the perfect moment to strike. I should have stood up. I should have left. But instead, I stayed. I stayed because something about her, something in her reckless confidence, made me forget the weight of running, the weight of fear. For the first time in so long, I wanted to feel something other than emptiness, even if it cost me everything. She tilted her head, studying me like I was some puzzle she had already solved. "You look like a woman with enemies," she said softly, almost teasing. My chest tightened. She wasn't wrong. But the way she said it wasn't cruel. It was curious, like she had enemies of her own and she recognized the same scars in me. I opened my mouth to deny it, to brush her off, but the truth stuck in my throat. Instead, I found myself whispering, "And you look like someone who enjoys finding them." She laughed, a sound sharp and beautiful at the same time, and it shook something loose inside me, something I had buried under all the running and hiding. The jukebox song changed, and for a moment, the bar felt smaller. The noise of glasses clinking and murmurs of conversation faded into the background. It was just me, her, and the bounty hunter's gaze burning from across the room. I should have feared her presence, but instead, I leaned closer, caught in a gravity I didn't understand. She didn't pull away. Her lips curved into another smirk, softer this time, almost tender, as if she knew exactly how deep she was sinking into me. I realized then that whatever path I thought I was on had already shifted. Trouble had found me, yes. But trouble had also offered me a hand, and for reasons I couldn't name, I was ready to take it. Pulse roared in my ears as she traced a finger slowly along the rim of my glass, her touch casual but deliberate. I couldn't look away. I didn't even want to. Somewhere in the back of my mind, I knew the bounty hunter was still there, that he had no intention of leaving without what he came for. But in that moment, it didn't matter. The only thing that mattered was the way her eyes locked onto mine, steady and unflinching, like she saw the real me buried under all the fear. And maybe, just maybe, she wasn't here to destroy me. Maybe she was here to set me free. She leaned back in the booth, crossing her legs like she owned the space, and I found myself trapped in the pull of her presence. The air felt heavier, charged with something I couldn't name but couldn't escape either. Her eyes, sharp yet softened with mischief, studied me like she was peeling back layers I had fought so hard to protect. I wanted to speak, to ask her name, to know why she had chosen my table out of all the empty ones in the bar, but the words stuck in my throat. It was as if she already knew my story, the one I carried like a scar, and was daring me to admit it out loud. Her fingers drummed lightly on the table, slow and deliberate, like each tap was meant to test how much I could take before breaking. "You don't seem like someone who hides well," she said finally, her voice smooth but with a dangerous curl at the edge. My chest tightened, and I glanced over her shoulder toward the corner where the bounty hunter still sat, motionless except for the steady movement of his glass to his lips. His eyes were on us, though he tried to mask it. I swallowed hard, shifting slightly in my seat, but the woman in front of me didn't move, didn't flinch, didn't care. Instead, she leaned closer, her lips just a breath away from my ear, and whispered, "He's watching you. He's been watching you since you walked in." My heart slammed against my ribs so hard I thought it might break. She pulled back, her smirk never leaving, as though danger was just another form of amusement to her. I wanted to deny it, to tell her she was wrong, but the weight of his stare burned holes into my back. "And yet you still sat down," I murmured, unable to stop the tremor in my voice. Her eyes flickered with something unreadable, maybe defiance, maybe hunger, maybe both. "That's exactly why I sat down," she replied, her tone low, intimate, like a secret meant only for me. The way she spoke made the walls around me crack. I had lived too long in the shadows, moving town to town, always looking over my shoulder, too afraid to feel anything real. But here she was, speaking danger into existence, and instead of running, I wanted to stay. Her hand brushed mine under the table, subtle, quick, but enough to make heat rise to my cheeks. My breath caught, and I almost pulled away, but she held her gaze steady on me, daring me to pretend I didn't want it. The touch lingered longer than it should have, long enough for my skin to remember it, long enough for my heart to betray me with its quickened pace. "You don't trust people easily," she said softly, not as a question but as a statement, as if she could see straight into my chest. I didn't answer, because she was right. Trust was a luxury I couldn't afford. And yet, here I was, letting her inch closer, letting her voice slip past my defenses like water seeping through cracks in stone. The bounty hunter shifted in his chair, and I froze. His fingers tapped the rim of his glass, his gaze sharper now, measuring, calculating. He wasn't just passing time, he was waiting, patient as a predator stalking prey. I knew he wasn't here for anyone else. He was here for me. But when I looked back at her, the fear dulled, replaced by something reckless. She smiled at me like she already knew the choice I was about to make, and maybe she did. She leaned forward again, her breath brushing against my neck, and whispered, "Let him watch." The words sent a shiver down my spine, not from fear, but from the dangerous thrill of it. My body betrayed me, leaning closer to her, drawn in like a moth to a flame even though I knew I would burn. Our knees touched beneath the table, a simple press of skin against skin that sent my mind spiraling. I tried to think, to calculate, to remember the rules I had lived by to stay alive, but she erased them with every glance, every smirk, every deliberate brush of her hand. "You don't belong to him," she said, nodding slightly toward the corner where the bounty hunter Saturday. "You don't belong to anyone." My lips parted, ready to argue, to remind her that freedom had never been mine to claim, but the words dissolved when her eyes softened, just for a second, just enough to show me that beneath all her sharp edges, there was a wound not unlike my own. The bartender walked by, placing another drink on the table, but I barely noticed. All I saw was her, the way she leaned back, casual and unbothered, while a man with blood on his hands sat just a few feet away waiting for the right moment to strike. I wondered what kind of woman could sit in the middle of danger and still smile like that. Maybe she wasn't afraid because she had nothing left to lose. Or maybe she was simply mad enough to flirt with death and enjoy every second of it. Either way, she pulled me deeper into her storm, and I didn't resist. I sipped the drink in front of me, the burn of alcohol scratching my throat, but it couldn't drown out the fire she had already lit inside me. My hands trembled slightly, but I curled them into fists to hide it. She noticed anyway. "You're scared," she said, her voice quieter now, almost tender. I forced a laugh, brittle and thin, shaking my head. "I've been scared my whole life," I admitted before I could stop myself. The confession slipped out like blood from a wound, and for once, I didn't regret the spilling. She didn't pity me, didn't mock me, didn't turn away. Instead, she leaned closer, her lips curling into the faintest, most dangerous smile. "Then maybe it's time to stop." The words struck me harder than I expected. Time to stop. Time to stop running, stop hiding, stop burying every flicker of desire under fear. For so long, survival had been the only thing that mattered. But now, staring into her eyes while a bounty hunter waited to pounce, survival didn't feel like enough anymore. I wanted more, even if it came wrapped in fire and ruin. She reached across the table, her fingers brushing the inside of my wrist this time, softer, slower, deliberate. My pulse leapt beneath her touch, and I knew she could feel it, knew she could taste the effect she had on me. And I let her, because for the first time in years, I didn't want to be invisible. Her lips hovered close enough to steal the air from my lungs, close enough that every beat of my heart felt like it might shake the table between us. I knew what she was doing, teasing the line between temptation and destruction, and I hated myself for how badly I wanted to cross it. The bar seemed to shrink around us, the smoke thicker, the clinking glasses duller, until there was nothing left but the curve of her mouth and the heat rolling off her skin. Her hand slid lower under the table, her fingertips brushing against the buckle of my belt. The touch was subtle at first, almost accidental, but her eyes told me otherwise. They held mine with a steady fire, daring me to flinch, daring me to pull away. I didn't. I couldn't. My breath trembled out of me as her lips traced the air between us, so dangerously close, so intoxicating that I forgot about the world, forgot about the bounty hunter in the corner who hadn't stopped watching. The bounty hunter's gaze was heavy, like a loaded gun pressed against the back of my head. I felt him see everything, every tremor of my body, every surrender in my breath, and yet he didn't move. He just sat there, calm as stone, drinking in the scene like he was waiting for the perfect moment to strike. That should have terrified me, should have made me shove her hand away, should have sent me running for the door. But instead, the awareness of his eyes only sharpened the heat between us. It was reckless, foolish, dangerous, but in that moment I welcomed it. I welcomed the way her mouth lingered just shy of mine, the way her breath tangled with mine, the way my body screamed for more even as my mind screamed to stop. She smiled against the edge of my jaw, her lips brushing so close it felt like a secret spoken straight into my blood. "You like being watched," she whispered, and the words made my stomach twist with something dark and electric. I wanted to deny it, to shake my head, but my voice betrayed me by falling silent. She didn't wait for an answer. Her lips pressed lower, trailing heat along the hollow of my throat before ghosting back toward my belt, where her fingers had already staked their claim. I gripped the edge of the table hard enough for my knuckles to ache, every muscle caught between fleeing and surrendering. My pulse hammered loud, too loud, but instead of pulling back, I leaned into her touch like a sinner begging for fire, and then, as if she had been waiting for my submission, she pulled back slightly, eyes narrowing, lips curling into something sharper. "You're not the only one running," she said, voice steady, cutting through the haze she had built around me. My breath caught, and I blinked, caught off guard. She let the words hang heavy between us, her hand retreating but leaving the memory of her touch burning against my skin. I stared at her, searching her face for the truth buried beneath her smirk. "What do you mean?" I managed to choke out. Her eyes flicked briefly toward the bounty hunter in the corner, then back to me. "You think he's only here for you?" The weight of her words pressed into my chest, heavier than any touch. Suddenly the pieces shifted. Her calmness, her boldness, the way she walked in here like she owned danger itself, it wasn't just arrogance. It was familiarity. She knew the game because she was playing it too. My throat went dry as realization clawed its way in. "You," I whispered, unable to finish. She leaned closer, her voice soft but cutting deep. "We're both wanted, darling. And if he doesn't take you, he'll take me. That's why I sat down. That's why I couldn't let you walk out alone." My world tilted. For so long, I had carried my fear like a private burden, convinced it was mine alone to bear. Now here she was, confessing that her scars were just as deep, her enemies just as relentless. I should have felt betrayed, should have been furious that she dragged me deeper into danger, but instead I felt something else, connection. For the first time, someone understood the weight I carried because they carried it too. And in her confession, I saw something raw and unguarded in her eyes, something that wasn't wrapped in smirks or sharp words. It was fear. Real, bone-deep fear, the kind that strips you bare. The bounty hunter shifted again, setting his glass down with a soft thud that echoed louder than it should have. The bartender glanced nervously at him, then quickly looked away. The whole room seemed to hum with tension, every patron suddenly smaller, quieter, as though they could sense the storm about to break. My palms were slick with sweat, my body torn between the fire of her confession and the ice of his gaze. She reached for my hand under the table, threading her fingers through mine without asking, her grip firm, grounding. "If he comes for us," she whispered, "we don't run alone." The simplicity of the promise cut me open. I had been alone for so long that the thought of someone staying, of someone fighting beside me, was more dangerous than the bounty hunter's gun. It terrified me more than his stare, more than the walls closing in. Because to believe her meant risking more than my life. It meant risking the small, fragile piece of myself I had guarded from everyone, the piece that still wanted to be loved. I searched her face again, desperate for a crack in her armor, for a lie I could hold on to, but there was nothing. Only fire, only truth, only the dangerous promise that she wasn't leaving me to face the darkness alone. The bounty hunter finally stood, his chair scraping against the floor with a sound that froze the room. He straightened his jacket, adjusted his hat, and took a step toward us. My grip on her hand tightened, and for the first time, I didn't feel the urge to flee. For the first time, I felt the pull to fight, not for myself, but for her, for us, for the bond that had been forged in the space of a breath, in the heat of her lips against my skin, in the truth she had just given me. She smirked again, but this time it was softer, steadier, more human. "Looks like the game's starting early," she murmured, squeezing my hand once before turning her eyes back to the man walking toward us. The moment he rose from his chair, the air shifted. Every sound in the bar seemed to dull into silence, as if the world itself was holding its breath. Boots against wood echoed heavy and deliberate, each step bringing him closer, each one pulling me further into the grip of fear. I had seen men like him before, men who hunted without mercy, who wore patience like armor and carried death in their pockets. He didn't rush. He didn't need to. He knew he already owned the room, knew every pair of eyes had turned toward him, waiting, wondering who his prey would be. My body begged me to move, to run, but her hand was still laced with mine beneath the table, her grip steady, unshaken, and for reasons I couldn't explain, it kept me rooted in place. He stopped a few feet away, his shadow stretching across the floor like a stain, his eyes hidden beneath the brim of his hat. When he spoke, his voice was low, smooth, carrying no anger, only certainty. "You two make it too easy." My throat tightened, but before I could speak, she leaned back in her seat with that same dangerous smirk, like a cat lounging in the path of a wolf. "If it's so easy," she said, her tone dripping with mockery, "then why are you still talking?" The bounty hunter's jaw twitched. He didn't answer, but the way his hand brushed the edge of his coat told me everything. A gun. Always a gun. Panic crawled up my spine, but she squeezed my hand, just once, hard enough to drag me back from the edge. Her calmness was madness, and yet it was the only thing holding me together. The bartender ducked his head, pretending to wipe down the counter but really just trying not to be caught in the crossfire. The other patrons shifted uneasily, eyes darting toward the door, ready to scatter the moment violence erupted. I could hear my own heartbeat louder than the jukebox, louder than the whispers, louder than anything else. She finally released my hand, not in fear, but in preparation. Her body shifted slightly, her weight sliding forward like a coiled spring ready to snap. The bounty hunter tilted his head, eyes flicking between us with cold calculation. "Two fugitives in one booth," he said flatly. "Double pay, half the effort." The word sliced through me, harsh and final. But she didn't flinch. Instead, she leaned forward, her elbows on the table, and said in a voice so calm it chilled me, "Only if you can take us alive." The room seemed to hold its breath again, waiting for him to draw. For a fraction of a second, I swore I saw his lip curl, as if amused by her defiance. Then his hand shifted toward his weapon. She moved first. Her boot slammed against the underside of the table, sending it crashing into his stomach. The bar erupted in chaos, chairs scraped, glasses shattered, people screamed. I stumbled to my feet, adrenaline flooding my veins, my eyes never leaving the bounty hunter as he staggered back, his hat falling to the ground. He cursed, grabbing at his side, but recovered quickly, drawing the gun with practiced ease. I felt my stomach lurch, fear clawing up my throat, but she was already grabbing my wrist. "Move," she shouted, and the next thing I knew, we were shoving through the crowd, pushing past the door into the night air. The desert wind hit me like a slap, cold and sharp, filled with dust that stung my eyes. We sprinted down the dirt road, the sound of boots pounding behind us. My chest burned, every breath jagged, but her hand never let go of mine, pulling me faster, pulling me forward, as if she carried the strength for both of us. My mind screamed questions. Where were we going? How long could we run? How many bullets before he caught us? But none of them mattered. All that mattered was her hand, her grip, her presence dragging me away from the jaws of death. We cut through an alley between two abandoned buildings, the stench of oil and rust thick in the air. She pressed me against the wall, both of us gasping, our chests heaving. She leaned close, her forehead almost touching mine, her breath hot against my skin. "He won't stop," she said, her voice hoarse but steady. "Not until one of us is gone." Her words chilled me, but her eyes burned, fierce and unyielding. She wasn't giving up. She wasn't backing down. And though every part of me wanted to collapse, to hide, to disappear, something inside me mirrored her fire. The sound of footsteps grew louder, echoing through the alley. He was close, too close. I gripped her arm, my nails digging into her skin. "We can't keep running forever," I whispered, panic bleeding into my voice. She shook her head, her lips brushing my ear as she spoke. "Then we don't run. We outsmart him." Before I could ask how, she pulled me down a narrow side path, our bodies pressed together in the shadows. My heart hammered against my ribs, not just from fear but from the closeness, the way her body fit against mine like we had always been meant to stand this way, side by side, against the world. The bounty hunter's shadow stretched across the alley entrance. He paused, scanning the darkness, his gun gleaming under the pale moonlight. My breath hitched, and I pressed closer into her, trying to silence the frantic sound of my own heartbeat. Her hand slid down my arm, steadying me, grounding me. Trust me, she mouthed, her lips barely moving, her eyes locked onto mine. And against all logic, against all the instincts that had kept me alive until now, I did. I trusted her. I let her hold me still as the hunter prowled past, his footsteps fading down the wrong path. When the danger finally slipped away into the distance, I sagged against the wall, my knees trembling. She caught me, her arms circling me tightly, her breath warm against the side of my neck. For a moment, the world slowed, the chaos melting into silence except for the sound of our breathing. I realized then how dangerous it was, not just the man chasing us, but her, the way she made me want to fight, want to stay, want to risk everything I had spent years protecting. She pulled back slightly, her eyes searching mine with a softness I hadn't seen before, and whispered, "We're not done yet. But as long as we're together, we've got a chance." The night stretched on as if it had no end, the desert air thick with the taste of dust and adrenaline. We walked for hours after slipping from the hunter's shadow, keeping to back roads and broken fences, the moon our only witness. My legs ached, my throat was dry, and every step felt heavier than the last, but her hand never let go of mine. It was the only thing anchoring me, the only proof that I wasn't still lost in the chaos of the bar. She led with confidence, though I could see the tension in her shoulders, the way she scanned every horizon like danger might crawl out of the sand at any moment. I wanted to ask her where we were going, what the plan was, how we could possibly outrun someone like him, but the words stuck in my throat. I didn't want to admit how scared I was. Eventually, we found a rundown motel on the edge of a highway, its neon sign buzzing weakly, half the letters burned out. She pulled me inside, exchanged quick words with the night clerk, and led me to a room that smelled of mildew and cigarette smoke. It wasn't much, but the four walls felt like a shield against the night, and for a moment, I allowed myself to breathe. I sank onto the bed, my body sagging under exhaustion. She locked the door, checked the window, and then sat across from me, her face unreadable. For the first time since we met, there was no smirk on her lips, no fire in her eyes, just silence. It unsettled me more than the danger outside. "You keep looking at me like you want to ask something," she finally said, her voice low, husky with fatigue. I swallowed hard, tracing the frayed edges of the blanket with trembling fingers. "Why are you really here?" I asked, the words sharper than I intended. She leaned back in the chair, tilting her head as if weighing whether to answer. "Same reason you are," she replied after a pause. "Trying to stay alive." I frowned, unsatisfied. "No," I whispered. "You could have ignored me in that bar. You could have kept walking. But you sat down. You put yourself next to me while he was watching. Why?" Her gaze softened, just for a heartbeat, before she looked away. "Because I saw myself in you," she admitted quietly. The confession cracked something inside me. She sighed, rubbing her temples as if the weight of the truth cost her more than she wanted to pay. "I've been running for so long I forgot what it feels like to stop. But when I saw you, I thought, maybe I'm not the only one." The words hung heavy between us, raw and bare, and for the first time I saw the woman behind the smirk, the one who carried scars that ran deeper than skin. The silence stretched, filled with everything we didn't say. I wanted to tell her I understood, that the loneliness of running eats you alive, that sometimes you crave a hand to hold even if it drags you deeper into fire. But the words tangled in my throat. Instead, I stood and crossed the room, my steps slow, my chest tight. When I stopped in front of her, she looked up, surprise flickering in her eyes. I reached out, brushing my fingers against hers. The contact was small, fragile, but it sent a tremor through me. She didn't pull away. She turned her hand over and let her fingers curl around mine, her grip warm, steady. We stayed like that for what felt like hours, saying nothing, just breathing in the silence together. My body ached for rest, but my mind was restless, haunted by the image of the bounty hunter, by the certainty that he would never give up. "He'll find us," I whispered finally, my voice trembling. Her thumb traced the back of my hand, slow, deliberate. Maybe, she said. But not tonight. Tonight, we breathe. The simplicity of her words sank into me, soothing the panic that had been clawing at my chest since the moment I saw him in that bar. Later, as the night dragged deeper, we lay side by side on the narrow bed. Neither of us spoke, but the closeness was its own kind of language. Her shoulder brushed mine, her warmth a shield against the cold creeping through the thin walls. I stared at the ceiling, tracing cracks in the plaster, wondering how I had ended up here, wondering why the thought of her leaving scared me more than the thought of being caught. Every time my eyes fluttered shut, I dreamed of boots pounding on the floor, of a gun's shadow stretching long, of blood on my hands. But when I woke, her arm was draped across me, her breath steady against my neck, and the fear dulled. For the first time in years, I wasn't alone in the dark. The following day bled into the next, hours blurring together. We stole food from gas stations, hid in abandoned barns, hitchhiked with truckers who didn't ask questions. Money ran low, nerves frayed, and exhaustion gnawed at us, but through it all, we clung to each other. Sometimes we argued, about directions, about risks, about whether we should keep moving or stand and fight, but every argument ended the same. Her hand brushing mine, her voice softening, her lips stealing the anger before it could harden into distance. The bond between us grew in the cracks of our fear, stronger than either of us expected, stronger than I dared to admit. One night, beneath the harsh glow of a neon sign outside a cheap diner, she kissed me. It wasn't reckless like before, wasn't born of defiance or the thrill of being watched. It was slow, aching, a confession pressed against my lips. My knees went weak, my heart stuttered, and for a moment, the world fell away. No bounty hunter. No running. Just us, tangled in a moment that felt more dangerous than any bullet. Because love, even whispered love, could destroy us faster than anything else. And yet I wanted it. I wanted her. Even if it meant falling deeper into the fire, even if it meant burning until there was nothing left.
The rain came that night without warning, sudden and hard, drumming against the thin roof of the diner where we had taken shelter. The storm seemed to mirror the tension between us, every drop a reminder of the chase, every rumble of thunder a warning that nothing was finished. She sat across from me in the booth, her hair damp, her jacket dripping onto the cracked vinyl seat, her eyes fixed on the window as if she were listening to ghosts in the distance. I studied her quietly, the curve of her jaw, the lines of exhaustion beneath her eyes, the restless tapping of her fingers on the table. I knew she was holding something back, a truth she carried like a blade pressed to her own skin. I wanted her to let me in, even if it cut me too. After what felt like an eternity of silence broken only by the storm, she finally spoke. "I wasn't always like this," she murmured, her voice low, almost swallowed by the rain. "There was a time I trusted someone. Believed in them so much I would have given my life for them. And they sold me out." The words were bitter, jagged, and though she said them without looking at me, I felt their weight settle in my chest. She clenched her fists on the table, the knuckles pale, her whole body tense with old anger. "They put a price on my head. Made me the target. And now, here I am." Her laugh was hollow, sharp, and it hurt to hear that I swallowed hard, unsure if I should speak, but the look in her eyes when she finally met mine told me she needed me to. "I know what that feels like," I whispered. My voice cracked as I let the words tumble out, words I had buried for years. "I trusted the wrong person too. I thought they loved me, thought they'd protect me. Instead, they took everything and left me with debts and enemies I couldn't pay. I ran because it was the only thing I could do." I stared at the table, unable to hold her gaze as shame burned through me. For so long, I had carried that wound in silence, but saying it aloud felt like peeling away layers of old skin. Her hand slid across the table, hesitant but steady, resting on mine. "So we're the same," she said softly. "Both betrayed, both hunted, both still stupid enough to keep breathing." The corner of her mouth twitched, not quite a smile, but not despair either. I looked up at her, and in that moment, I didn't see the danger, the smirks, the games. I saw a woman who was just as broken as I was, a woman who had been cut open by the world and was still fighting to stay alive. That connection bound us tighter than any kiss could. It was the truth, raw and painful, but it was ours. The storm outside eased, the thunder rolling farther away, but before the quiet could settle, the diner door creaked open. The air changed instantly. I didn't need to turn my head to know who it was. The bounty hunter's presence filled the room like smoke, suffocating, inescapable. The few other patrons shrank back into their seats, their conversations cut off mid-sentence. He moved with the same deliberate calm as always, his boots clicking against the tile, his shadow stretching long under the flickering lights. He stopped at our booth, sliding into the seat across from us without invitation, his gun still holstered but close enough to remind us it was never far from his hand. For a long moment, none of us spoke. He simply watched us, his eyes cold, calculating, like a man appraising cattle before slaughter. Then, in a voice that carried no malice but no mercy either, he said, "I'll make it simple. One of you gives up the other, and I walk away. You'll live free, at least for a while. Or you both fight, and I drag you out together in chains." The words were like ice water poured down my spine. I froze, my breath caught, the choice hanging heavy between us. My mind screamed, the temptation sharp and cruel, freedom, safety, a life without running. If only I betrayed her. I glanced at her, and the fear in her eyes twisted the knife deeper. She looked back at me, her jaw set, her face unreadable, but in her gaze there was a question. Would I choose myself over her? Would I take the chance to save my own skin? The weight of it pressed hard on my chest. My throat closed, my palms slick with sweat. For a moment, the silence stretched so long I thought it might crush me. Then, slowly, she shook her head, the smallest movement, but enough to tell me her answer. She wasn't going to give me up. Not now. Not ever. Did I turn back to the bounty hunter, my pulse hammering, my voice barely steady. No deal. The words felt like a leap off a cliff, but I didn't regret them. His eyes narrowed, and for the first time, I saw a flicker of something, maybe surprise, maybe amusement, maybe both. Stupid choice, he muttered. His hand hovered near his weapon, but he didn't draw. Instead, he leaned back in the booth, studying us like he couldn't quite decide if we were brave or just insane. The tension stretched until I thought my heart would burst, then he stood slowly, tossing a few bills onto the table for his untouched coffee. "You won't get far," he said simply before walking out, his shadow trailing after him like a curse. The moment the door shut behind him, I exhaled, my whole body trembling. She reached across the table again, gripping my hand so tightly it hurt, but I didn't pull away. Her eyes burned into mine, fierce and unyielding. "You could have saved yourself," she whispered. "But you didn't." My lips parted, my voice shaking. "Neither did you." For a heartbeat, everything else fell away. The storm, the fear, the bounty hunter, it all faded until there was only us, our hands clasped across the table, the bond between us carved deeper by the choice we had made. That we slipped out of the diner an hour later, the night heavy with silence, the world outside glistening from the storm. My chest still ached from the weight of what we had faced, but beneath it, something new stirred. Trust. Fragile, reckless, dangerous trust. As we walked down the deserted road, her shoulder brushed mine, and for the first time, I didn't just feel like I was running. I felt like I was running with someone worth running for.
The night carried us farther than we thought possible, our footsteps sinking into the wet earth as if the storm wanted to drag us down with it. Every mile felt heavier, every silence stretched thin with the memory of him sitting across from us in that diner. His voice still echoed in my head, that cruel calmness, the way he had offered freedom like a poisoned gift. I could still see his eyes, sharp as blades, watching us like prey too stubborn to lie down. She walked beside me without speaking, her jaw tight, her hands shoved deep into her jacket pockets, but I could feel the storm inside her too. Every time the wind whistled, she glanced over her shoulder, every shadow on the horizon made her tense. The world felt like it was closing in, and yet, the only thing I could cling to was the warmth of her presence beside me. By the time dawn broke, our bodies were worn down, hollow from lack of food and sleep. We stumbled across a field where the grass grew high and wild, leading us toward an abandoned farmhouse at the edge of a grove of twisted trees. The paint on the walls had long since peeled, the windows were cracked, and the roof sagged under the weight of years, but it was shelter, and we needed it. Inside, the air smelled of dust and rot, the floorboards creaked, and old newspapers were scattered like forgotten ghosts. We collapsed in one of the back rooms, leaning against the wall, our shoulders pressed together, and for a long time, neither of us spoke. We were too tired, too hollow, too raw from the weight of the choices we had made. Finally, she broke the silence, her voice barely louder than a breath. "You should have taken his offer." I turned to her, startled by the bitterness in her tone. "And leave you?" "You know I couldn't." She looked away, her lips pressed tight, but her hands gave her away. They trembled where they rested on her knees. "He's going to break us," she whispered. "He'll keep coming until one of us doesn't get back up. You don't know what you've tied yourself to." Her words cut deep, but I refused to let them push me away. I reached for her hand, threading my fingers through hers even as she tried to pull back. "I know exactly what I've tied myself to," I said softly. "And I'd do it again. 100 times. Her eyes met mine then, wet with unshed tears, her face stripped of all the bravado she usually wore like armor. She didn't say anything, but she leaned her forehead against mine, her breath shaky, her grip tightening until our fingers ached. In that moment, it felt like the walls of the broken farmhouse held more truth than any place I had ever known. We were both hunted, both broken, but together we were something stronger than we had been apart. It scared me, the way I needed her, the way I would rather die than see her taken from me, but it was the kind of fear that made me alive. We rested for a few hours, though neither of us slept deeply. My dreams were filled with shadows and the heavy sound of boots, and when I woke, the air was thick with unease. She was already awake, pacing the room, her hand resting near the knife on her hip. "He's close," she muttered, her eyes darting to the cracks in the boarded windows. I listened, holding my breath, and then I heard it too, the faint crunch of gravel under slow, deliberate steps. My stomach twisted. The bounty hunter had found us again. The next moments blurred into panic. We slipped out through the back door, running across the field with the tall grass whipping against our legs, the farmhouse shrinking behind us. My lungs burned, my legs screamed, but I pushed harder, her hand gripping mine like an anchor. Behind us, I could hear the steady rhythm of boots, unhurried, relentless. He didn't need to chase us in a sprint. He knew we couldn't keep running forever. That was his game, wear us down, break us piece by piece, until surrender felt easier than breath. We stumbled into the grove of trees, the shadows thick, the branches clawing at our clothes. My heart pounded so loudly I thought it would give us away. We crouched low behind a fallen trunk, holding our breaths, our fingers intertwined so tightly they hurt. The silence was unbearable, the kind that makes every sound ring louder, every crack of a twig feel like thunder. I could see her chest rise and fall quickly, her lips parted, her eyes darting toward the edges of the grove. I wanted to tell her it would be okay, but the words felt like lies. Instead, I squeezed her hand, praying she understood the promise in that small gesture. I wasn't letting go. Minutes stretched like hours. Then we saw him, moving through the trees with the same unshakable calm he always carried. His silhouette cut through the dawn light, his shadow long, his presence suffocating. He stopped, just a few feet away from where we crouched, his head turning slowly, as if he could smell our fear. My pulse hammered, sweat trickled down my back, and I pressed my free hand against my mouth to stop from gasping. He stood there for what felt like forever, scanning the grove, and then, without a word, he walked on, his boots fading into the distance. We didn't move until the sun was high in the sky. Even then, every step felt dangerous, every sound in the woods made us flinch. When we finally emerged on the other side of the grove, the road stretched before us, empty and endless, and I realized something that chilled me to the bone. He wasn't just chasing us. He was toying with us. He could have taken us back there, could have ended it, but he hadn't. He wanted us to keep running, wanted us to break ourselves apart piece by piece until we weren't even human anymore. That night, as we found another place to hide, she sat beside me, her face hard but her eyes full of something I hadn't seen before, resolve. "He thinks we're weak," she said, her voice low and steady. "He thinks he can wear us down until we're begging for him to take us. But he doesn't know us. Not yet." She looked at me then, her hand finding mine, her grip strong and certain. "If we're going down fighting. Together." Her words filled me with a fire I hadn't felt in years. Fear still gripped me, but beneath it, there was something stronger, defiance, loyalty, and love. I nodded, my chest tight, my throat aching. "Together," I whispered. And for the first time since it all began, I felt like maybe, just maybe, we had a chance. The desert stretched out before us like an endless graveyard, silent and cruel under the weight of the midday sun. We had been moving for hours, our bodies scraped raw from branches, our throats parched, our eyes burning from lack of sleep, but neither of us spoke of stopping. The decision had already been made, there was no more running. He would always find us, always stalk the edges of our lives, always haunt every moment we tried to claim for ourselves. The only choice left was to face him. The thought alone should have shattered me, but as I glanced at her, walking beside me with her jaw set and her eyes fixed forward, I felt something I hadn't in years. I felt ready. Not because I wanted to die, but because if this was where it ended, it would end with her. That was enough. By evening, we reached the shell of an old service station on the side of a cracked highway. The windows were shattered, the roof half caved in, but the wide open lot around it made it the perfect place to see him coming. She stopped just inside the doorway, her chest rising and falling as she studied the empty space. "This is it," she said, her voice steady, though I could see her hands shaking slightly when she thought I wasn't looking. I walked over to her, touched her arm, and whispered, "I'm not leaving you. No matter what happens." She turned to me then, and for the first time, there was no smirk, no mask of control, no walls between us. Her eyes shone with something raw, something that broke me open. "You're the only thing I've had in years that feels real," she whispered back. If we fall together. The hours dragged as we waited. Every sound in the distance made my heart pound harder. Every gust of wind across the cracked asphalt sounded like footsteps. We sat close, our backs against the wall, her arm brushing mine, our silence heavy but not empty. We had said all the words we needed already. What remained was unspoken, the bond, the trust, the love that had grown in the spaces between fear and flight. When the sound of boots finally reached us, slow and deliberate against the gravel, my stomach twisted, but I didn't flinch. The moment had come. He appeared in the doorway like a shadow made flesh, tall and unshaken, his coat moving slightly in the desert wind. His eyes swept the room, cold and certain, landing on us like a predator claiming its prey. "You've made me work harder than most," he said, his voice carrying the same quiet weight as always. "But this is the end of the road." His hand hovered near his weapon, calm, patient, as if he knew the outcome already. I felt her shift beside me, her body coiled like a spring, her knife glinting faintly in her hand. For a moment, time stretched thin, the silence pulling taut as a wire between us all. Then it snapped. She lunged first, a flash of steel aimed at his chest, her movements sharp with desperation. He sidestepped easily, his fist slamming into her ribs, sending her crashing to the ground. I screamed, the sound tearing from my throat, but before I could think, I grabbed a broken pipe from the floor and swung with every ounce of strength I had. It connected with his shoulder, a hollow crack echoing through the room, but it barely slowed him. He turned toward me, his eyes colder than death itself, and in that instant, I thought it was over, but she wasn't finished. Blood at her lips, pain etched into her face, she rose behind him, her knife flashing once more. This time it found flesh, sinking deep into his side. He staggered, his breath hissing, his hand reaching for his weapon, but I moved again, slamming the pipe against his wrist until the gun clattered to the floor. We fought like animals, wild and reckless, driven not by skill but by the refusal to lose each other. Every strike, every gasp, every scream was fueled by the same truth. We had already lost everything else. The struggle felt endless, brutal, and raw, until finally he dropped to one knee, blood staining the dusty floor beneath him. His eyes flicked between us, still steady, still unafraid, as if even in defeat he held some twisted respect. "You'll regret this," he muttered, his voice breaking for the first time. But I didn't let him finish. I drove the pipe into his chest with a cry that came from somewhere deeper than fear, deeper than rage. He collapsed, the fight leaving his body, his shadow finally shrinking into the silence of the room. When it was done, I stood there shaking, the pipe slipping from my hands, my vision blurred by tears I didn't even feel coming. She staggered to me, her arm wrapping around my waist, her body trembling against mine. "It's over," she whispered, though her voice carried more disbelief than certainty. I clung to her, burying my face in her shoulder, sobbing into the fabric of her jacket. For so long we had been running, for so long the weight of his presence had strangled every breath, and now, in the hollow silence of that broken service station, we were free. We stayed there until the sky turned black and the stars spread out above us like fragile sparks. Our bodies ached, our wounds burned, but none of it mattered. We sat together in the doorway, her head resting against mine, the desert wind carrying away the last traces of fear. I thought of everything we had lost, everything we had endured, and realized that somehow, against all odds, we had gained something too. We had each other. And that was more than I had ever dared to hope for. As dawn broke again, painting the horizon with fire, we stood side by side, our shadows stretching long across the empty highway. The future was uncertain, the world still cruel, but we no longer carried it alone. Her hand found mine, warm and steady, and when she looked at me, I saw not just the survivor I had been, but the person I had become with her. For the first time in years, I felt alive. And whatever came next, we would face it together.